You have to enable screen sharing for me.
Gotcha. Okay, there you go. And I'm going to, this should be coming back very shortly. I'm going to show them one thing, just one example from that previous resource we were talking about.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll do that after we after the break, so we can just go straight into you. Now you live in the city, right, Tom?
We moved to Corte Madera.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So did you have some very orange days last week?
Creepy.
Yeah, the orange and the red were kind of creepy. I think even creepier was it was about midday, and it just got dark here. It just looked like nighttime.
Yeah, I know. It was like 8 in the morning. It's like, when will it get light? This is really wrong.
Oh, well, Corte Madera is great. I love it up there.
Yeah, yeah, we're happy. We're big into outdoor cycling, hiking, and all that, so it's pretty perfect.
That's great. All right, we'll give folks just another minute or two to return.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think everybody is back in. So I am really excited to welcome Tom Roth to our class tonight. I've heard Tom speak before, and I know it's going to be both interesting and informative, but I always find it also really kind of inspirational when he speaks. You know, we've talked about in market research that a lot of people say they built a community. A lot of companies say, oh, you know, we've built a community. You can do research with our community. And quite often really just what that means is they've got an email list of people who have agreed to take surveys for money. And a lot of folks really don't deliver on that promise and that potential of really building a community around their business. But when I think of all the people I know, I think Tom has really been the most successful in really actually building a community, not just somebody's community in name, but really in spirit as well. So Tom, I told everybody coming in that you are really one of the leaders in the Bay Area market research community. And when I think about issues around the LGBT community, I think you are one of the leading experts in the world. So we are super happy to have you join us. I would mention to the class, as always, feel free to keep the chat lively, ask questions in there, and we'll have a couple breaks along the way, and we can ask Tom questions. So Tom, take it away.
All right. Well, super happy is how I feel too. This is really quite an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with your students tonight. Are you seeing my screen? Because I'm not really sure what is being projected.
Yes, I do see your
my
screen.
PowerPoint screen. Okay, good. And it fills the box?
Yes, I think we can also see your next slide coming up.
Okay,
as well,
let me get out of here and fix that. I'll turn that off. And you still see it seems like.
Yes. I mean, that works right there. I mean, that still takes up the, oh no, there you got it. That's perfect.
Okay, good. All right, so welcome everyone. As I mentioned, I'm psyched to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself to get started and how I started the company. I know some of you are or will be entrepreneurs, so maybe you can take away some of the findings of how I got this started many years ago. First of all, I want to thank Stephen. This is, like I said, a great honor to co-present tonight and be part of the USF community. for this short period of time. Stephen's a great guy. The little I know of him, I just think the world of him. So you're in great hands with him.
I appreciate that.
So thank you. Let me introduce my little team. I'm Tom Roth. I'm the guy on the left. And David Paisley is my senior research director. He's been with the company almost as long as I have. And Lu Zhen is our research director. She's currently in Shanghai. Otherwise, I'm sure she would want to be part of our conversation tonight too. She's awesome. I tell her that if she left the company, I would too. She's been so great. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, just so I'm not just some sort of talking head tonight. I live in Marin now. I was actually born in Marin, lived in the city for 25 years, and then moved back to Marin. And we've been here a few years. That's me with my husband, Scott, and our dog, Leela, at Point Reyes. And when I'm not doing something locally, I really do love international adventure. One of my favorites of many, many, many favorites was cycling at literally the top of the Himalaya in India, mountain biking there. So that was quite a thrill. And we could really talk about my adventures if you'd rather, because I have a lot of stories to tell, and it's been a highlight of my life. And when I'm not doing that, my volunteer work is to teach transcendental meditation to people living with HIV. And we've done some research on that to indicate the tremendous results that come as a result of sitting quietly and doing this practice for 20 minutes twice a day. The company, I'll tell you a little bit about us. I started the company back in 1992, and I realized that predates many of you. I don't know where you were before you were born, but we were here doing market research. And so we are an NGLCC certified supplier. And that's kind of important. If you do go out on your own and you become an entrepreneur and start your own business, there are lots of minority certifications that will give you entree into the Pepsi Colas and Wells Fargos of the world that you may not otherwise get as a small company. So I think it's a really important step to take and explore. There's women-owned, there's African-American owned, there's Latinx owned, et cetera. And NGLCC certifies LGBTQ owned. We've been doing this over 25 years. Stephen mentioned our panel, and I think our panel is really what makes us great, besides a really good team and really awesome clients. The panel are completely community representative. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to explain what that means, because it's really important. If you're opening USA Today or Wall Street Journal and you see some little snippet survey research about the quote LGBTQ community, and you look at the methodology and they say that they sampled 187 people or 212 people, roll your eyes, because that cannot possibly represent the spectrum of what the LGBTQ community represents. I mean, even if you look at men and women, if you look at genders and generations and ethnicities and demographics otherwise, all that makes a difference. So when we do survey reports, we sample 2,000 plus, and then we break it down in matrix. And when I cover the research tonight, I'll demonstrate how that works. So we're a full service market research firm, but we focus exclusively on LGBTQ. And it's been quite a ride. Honestly, in 1992, there were very few clients, and we ate a lot of noodles and just patiently did research, did training sessions, met with corporations to emphasize the opportunities that are there with the LGBTQ community. And we grew worldwide. Some of our clients, about a third of our clients are in the financial world. About a third of our clients are in tourism and hospitality, which is a huge segment for LGBTQ. About a third of our clients are kind of everywhere else. I mean, from Hallmark cards and nonprofits and UPS, Google. Yes, even Google needs us for information. It's quite diverse. And this just sort of is a sampling of the wide variety of companies that are integrating LGBTQ into their marketing and communications now. So we're really proud to have made a dent in that and worked with the US Census. And sometimes other researchers come to us as well when they're stuck and unable to fulfill a project. That's just a little bit about us. I really want to spend time today on the survey we did just a couple months ago. It's our 14th annual LGBTQ community survey. And this is quite a track record. I don't think there's any other survey that's gone on this long and been as comprehensive as this has been. The report is about USA participants. It's really our largest segment. The panel really was about 30-something thousand around the world. 28% came from our panel, 72% came from our partners, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. These are LGBTQ community members who interact with the LGBTQ community. So they attend events, they read media, they belong to organizations. These are the people that our clients really want to talk to. So that's what the survey was fielding to. And we fielded the survey in English, Spanish, French, and yes, Hungarian. Long story there. And then we rate the results. Typically, when we do a survey, there'd be more gay men than women. Transgender is fluctuating in terms of a larger or smaller segment. So we weight the results, and it's super important to do that. So when we do say LGBTQ, it really represents the whole community. We also weight by generation so that the results aren't skewed. And it was fielded during a very crazy time in our country during COVID. The first 13 didn't have that. And so the results are really interesting just from that perspective. So when I said that we have partners, this is another takeaway you can learn from. The way we grew our panel and the way we do our research surveys is by partnering with 150 LGBTQ media, events, and organizations. So we create the survey, we send the link out to all of these media and organizations. They send the link out to all of their members, readers, attendees, etc. And therefore we get a very, very representative slice of the overall LGBTQ community. And that is really important. We don't want to do a survey, call it LGBTQ, and have it be all millennial gay men. I mean, it just is unfair to really represent the community that way. So all of these different media, then it's a win-win. They get the data that we collect for them. And then, for example, the Pride Journeys or LGBTQ Nation can use that data when they're looking for advertisers or for sponsors of their events. So it's really win-win. We grow and diversify our panel, and at the same time, they get some great data that they can use. So tonight I'm talking about LGBTQ as a niche market, as a segment of the overall community. But I want to let you know that you can basically cut and paste. As I say LGBTQ and how we developed our panel, you can do the same thing for the Latinx market. You can do the same thing for the African American market, for the Generation Z market. These are opportunities to grow your own business. So I just wanted to go into how we approach it because I think it's really important. So we're going to take a few breaks along the way to take questions. The first section I wanted to start with because I think terminology within our community is very, very important. Because what is marketing? What is advertising? What is communications if you don't have the ability to resonate with the audience you're talking to? If you call us by a well-meaning but wrong term, it can really be off-putting. And there goes your entire marketing budget. So terminology is super important. And even in your years of maybe observing the LGBTQ market, you may have realized that we were the gay market, we were the gay and lesbian market, we were the GLBT market, then we were the LGBT market, now we're the LGBTQ market. And there's a reason for all that evolution. There is no singular LGBTQ market. A lot of our clients come to us and they say we want to reach the gays or the gays and lesbians or the LGBTQ market. And we have to really educate them that there is no singular LGBTQ market. We are as diverse as the world's population. If you think about it, we just happen to be LGBTQ, but you know, I love mountain biking. I'm vegetarian. I am Jewish. I have lots of different interests that aren't just me being an LGBTQ person. So if you slice and dice, there's a lot of cross-referencing or cross-indexing that happens when you're reaching the LGBTQ market. You're also reaching people of various communities, professions, and cultures as well. Over the past 15 years or so, LGBTQ has really become part of the diversity conversation. So you know probably that in major corporations now, there is a whole department, usually led by a VP, or at least a director, to look after diversity. And diversity is not only in terms of outreach and communications, but also in terms of HR and hiring and employment practices. So diversity is an important topic in most, if not all, of major corporations today. My message to them is, yes, that's great to include LGBTQ as part of the diversity message, but as I just said, there is no one LGBTQ market. Diversity is part of LGBTQ as well. So when we look at LGBTQ, we have to look at various demographics within LGBTQ based on our gender identity, sexual orientation, our generation. Young people consume media very differently than older people. Race and ethnicity, your location. If you live in San Francisco, you purchase different than if you live in Mobile, Alabama. And relationship status, single people purchase differently than couples or families, right? So all of these come into play when you're looking at the LGBTQ market, and the intersectionality of our community and our segments within our community is really where the selling point is. So let's talk about the term LGBTQ. What is it? I bet if I asked all 24 or 26 of you right now, each of you would have your own definition of what LGBTQ is. Why? Because there is no definition of LGBTQ. There can't be an official definition of it. I mean, we are a very active, dynamic community. Academics are very concerned about SOGI. SOGI is yet another acronym. It means sexual orientation, gender identity. And so they're looking at more of the clinical, you could say, approach to what is LGBTQ. Health organizations are really looking at sexual behavior. They use terms like MSM. MSM means men who have sex with men. So when we get contacted by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to do a study, they're really looking for us to do outreach to men who have sex with men, not necessarily the overall LGBTQ community. The census really only tracks same-sex households. So obviously that is going to way undercount the overall LGBTQ community because we're not all in a same-sex household. But it's a start, but they're not asking that question this year. And corporations, who are our clients, really are looking at us as a cultural consumer. These are LGBTQs who are out interacting with the community, reading our media, looking at social media, following influencers, attending events, belonging to organizations. These are the people who are what we would call the culture of LGBTQ. It really doesn't have that much to do with their sexual orientation or gender identity. They feel that they are LGBTQ. So as I was mentioning, different segments within LGBTQ will be very different as a market. So a lesbian couple who are retired, they live in Sedona, Arizona, are going to be very different as consumers than a 22-year-old queer guy with his first job in Manhattan, right? You can just see the differentiation there. So when you lump all LGBTQs together and it skews one way or the other, it's really going to influence the research and the findings and how useful they are. So when we do our surveys, we don't say, are you gay or straight? We don't say, are you a man or a woman? We get hate mail if we do something like that. And we should, because there's so many, we'd say a full spectrum of sexuality and gender in our community. And so although we started out as the gay and lesbian market in the 90s, in the years 2000, we started to become the GLBT market, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender market. That quickly changed as we were really focusing on inclusive the lesbian market became LGBT, which we're really happy about. And then LGBTQ, the Q was added for the queer and questioning community. And now you'll see a plus, you'll see IA, you'll see Q2. I'll talk about those in a minute. But this is how we field our surveys. We say, do you identify as, and we say, select all that apply. And I would say most of the people who take our surveys select more than one, because you can be a bisexual man and identify as straight and identify as gender fluid. So we let everybody identify and let us know who they are. So terminology, we do this question every year, and it's something that I think our clients are most interested in because it changes every year and it drives our clients crazy. If you're Wells Fargo or you're Hallmark cards, and we're constantly changing how you should be referring to us, think of it, they have to change all their URLs, they have to change all their marketing materials, but they have to, because different terms come into favor. Right now, the most favorable term across all genders and generations is LGBTQ. So you can feel safe referring to our community as LGBTQ. LGBT isn't far behind, but LGBTQ has overtaken LGBT, so the trend is LGBTQ. Using the term gay, well, it's problematic. Even though 56% feel like they're okay with it, it's problematic because if you say the gay market in your marketing and communications, the lesbian community feels left out. The trans community, the gender non-conforming community, they feel left out. So you have to be mostly concerned with being inclusive, and that's where LGBTQ comes in. So you'll see a couple terms here at the bottom. In the United States, we don't typically use the I. I is for intersex. If you're marketing and communicating in Asia, in Latin America, or Europe, they use the I very frequently, and it's very popular. Lots of the organizations in Europe, for example, are LGBTI. A is for allies, or could be asexual or agender. Just like the Q could be queer or questioning. There's even differentiation in terms of what these letters can mean. And then the term queer. So queer has its advantages, it has its challenges. About half of those who took the survey, and again, this is 17,000 LGBTQ people across all genders and generations, about half identify as queer. Most will consider it an umbrella term that sort of includes everybody, and that's, I think, the direction that we'll be going. Millennials are very favorable about the term and identify as queer far more than baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer, first to tell you. And as a baby boomer, when I was young, I was harassed by other people who called me queer, and it was very derogatory. So older, especially gay men, have that baggage with the term queer. I'm down with it, I like it, I use it, but a lot of people don't because they see that it's derogatory, like the term fag. We can use it with each other, but we sure don't want American Airlines calling us a fag. Does that make sense? So it's all context in that case. And it also breaks out differently by gender and by generation. So the term queer, it just has baggage. And you can feel free to use it within your friends and within the community, but probably not representing a large corporation. So we boiled it all down for you. And this is a really good slide to keep. I'm gonna have this presentation available to you after, but I wanna talk about a few terms before we take questions and move on. First of all, the green section, the go section, these are terms that are frequently used and are very comfortable within the community. And there's some differentiation. So for example, we don't use the term sexual preference. That's a bad word. Sexual orientation, that's a good word. If you're new to this, it's like, well, what's the difference? But sexual preference indicates a choice. Sexual orientation means it's wired into your genetics. Big difference. If somebody says, you're gay because you prefer to be, Yeah, it's not like I prefer vanilla ice cream or chocolate. It's something that's really just part of who I am. So there's nuance there, and it's really important to understand that. You'll also see the word transgendered as if it was an event that happened last Tuesday. It's a transgender community. It's not the transgendered community. Transgender is something that's a process, and the transgender community is one that is constantly evolving and not just a snapshot. Terms that are used as a caution: queer, as I mentioned, lifestyle. I have an outdoor lifestyle, but I don't have a queer lifestyle. I don't even know what that would mean, but the religious right sort of points to us kind of like this is a choice and that's your lifestyle. Pronouns are super important in communicating to us. If you get up in front of a group of LGBTQ people and you say, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, you just pissed off a lot of people because we're not all ladies and gentlemen. There's a whole spectrum of gender identity. It's subtle, it's nuance. If you say Mr. and Mrs., same thing. The term gay neighborhood or gay friendly or gay this or gay, of course, is excluding a lot of the other letters in our community's alphabet. So before going on to that, let's see if Stephen has collected any questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to blab on for the rest of the night.
I don't see anything in the chat, but I do invite people to just unmute right now if they have a question.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I'll continue. I'm enjoying this.
Okay.
So every year we ask this, and it's super important to the media, it's important to our organizations and to our events. Corporations that support LGBTQ equality are more important than ever. Corporations, I'll give you a little history lesson. Corporations in the 90s made the LGBTQ community something that was respected and included, where employees were instead of being shunned or fired, were being attracted by corporations. Corporations, we can say all we want about what they're doing with the environment or et cetera, but corporations from a social perspective have helped the LGBTQ community enormously. And so 85% agree that corporations who support the LGBTQ community are more important than ever. Corporations lead the way, especially when the government is working against us. We have to look to corporations to make our lives palatable. Companies that support the LGBTQ equality will get more My Business this year. So it's really a business case for a company to come out in support of our equality, of our marriage equality. Corporations made marriage equality. It wasn't the government. The government came in dragging their feet, kicking and screaming, while corporations said, you know what? We got to go for this. And it's corporations that made that happen. Now, this is sad. 61% agree that there's going to be a rollback of LGBTQ equality gains in the coming year. Even though we do have marriage equality now, that's fantastic. It can actually be rolled back. Equality in employment and everything else that we've achieved through, especially through the Obama years, is being and will be rolled back with this administration. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety about this election. So this is a really interesting question. I think those of you who are following corporations, and I know it's part of your class assignment to follow a corporation and make presentations on them. We ask in our survey in blank boxes, we present 5 blank boxes. In the past 12 months, which companies or brands have gone above and beyond to show genuine, authentic support through their outreach and policies and practices? So this is a blank box. We don't give them a list that they can check. They have to think, which companies did a great job with our community in this past year? And so 24% of those 17,000 people typed in Target of gay men, 30% of cisgender and bi women. Target rose to the top because of Target's policies. You may or may not have read the news. I follow it all, of course, regarding LGBTQ, but not everybody does. So Target has done some really great things. For example, you know, if you go into a typical department store, there'll be a sign at the end cap that says, boys' toys over here, girls' toys over here, right? It's pretty typical. Target said, why are we doing that? Who are we to decide what toys boys should play with and what toys girls should play with? And now it's just toys. Let the kids decide what they want to play with. So these kinds of things are huge. Another thing that they did was they made private changing rooms rather than a men's section for changing and a women's section for changing. They just said, pick a booth and change. We don't care what your gender identity is. You're welcome here. You belong here. Things like that make a huge difference. And Target has done those kinds of things. So Apple has done great things. Starbucks, Absolute Vodka has been around forever. They were literally the first advertiser in the LGBTQ community. You'll see a few others that rose to the top in the lesbian and bi women and the transgender and gender non-binary sections. These companies have also done a great job connecting with our community. So if you're following any of these companies, I encourage you to dig into what they're doing right with the LGBTQ community, or whatever company you're following. If it's not on the list, find out why they're not on the list. It's really interesting to see what they're doing and what they're not doing. I covered that one. And oh, I'm going backwards, that's why. Sorry about that. So how do companies make an impact? First of all, seeing the brand advertise in our media is very important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about media in a few minutes. The brand sponsored an LGBTQ event. The brand donates to LGBTQ organizations. These are really important. So if you end up advising a corporation on how to reach sub-communities or niche markets, is another term, or the LGBTQ community, it's not just about placing ads. Placing ads in our media is super important. However, that's not all that's important. We want to see that you're involved. We want to see that you're rolling up your sleeves and connecting with us on a personal level. And the other thing is pride events are super important. And why I say that is Pride went virtual this year, but it's still very, very important to our community. Pride is really one event that literally the entire community shows up to. I mean, there may be some events and organizations that are stronger with lesbians or stronger with families or stronger with the African-American, Black African-American, LGBTQ community, but Pride really is all about all of us, and it's very important to us. And 44% indicated that they're a brand that sponsors the LGBT Pride event is also very important to them. So these are ways that a company can make an impact. It's not all about just placing an ad. They have to genuinely be involved in our community. Anything come in, or I'll just keep rolling through?
Yes, we had a couple of questions. Bianca, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry, my camera isn't working, but I just wanted to, I was wondering if you can clarify like the negative connotation behind GLBT versus LGBT, because I know that a lot of people like in my circle use that, but I never really understood the difference.
Excellent. Yeah, so here's a little history lesson. When we started asking that terminology question, and actually I'll make you dizzy for a second, but I'm going to bounce back to it because it's really a good topic. Oops, too far. All right, so yeah, why is GLBT, actually GLBT isn't even on the list anymore. So I'm going to talk about GLBT and why it's on this list. GLBT is antiquated. It makes a company seem like they're back in the early 2000s or the late 90s. Because back then, when we started to use acronyms, the gay men preferred GLBT and the lesbians preferred LGBT. So it's really kind of an interesting demographic approach to our terminology. We did these charts, these pie charts, I mean, these bar charts that I just showed you, and you'll see that in those charts that gay men back then were strongly in preference of GLBT, gay men first, and lesbians were strongly preferring LGBT, lesbians first. And over time, and not to say that we did this, but I think our research that showed the importance of the lesbian community, and if you're talking about gay and lesbian, but really only marketing to gay men, you're missing out half of gay and lesbian. All of that started to move the market to come to a point about 6-7 years ago where LGBT became the favored term. And now if a company says we're GLBT friendly, we think, okay, but are you living under a rock? Because we don't use that term anymore. And that's why I said it drives corporations crazy, because they may have, you know, target.com/GLBT, and all of a sudden, of course, they have to change everything. But our terminology changes as our community evolves.
Great. I think Mariel had a question also.
Yeah, I had a question, but then you kind of touched on it earlier. So I don't know if you'd like to expound more on it. But I was just thinking that when marketing to the LGBTQ community, brands sometimes just slap on the rainbow on their products and call it a day. So, but what brands do you think have actually gotten it right?
What brands have actually what?
Gotten it
Have
right.
gotten it right. Yeah.
Well, this chart of brands that that I think it's sort of a vote of the. Did I go forward?
Yeah, I think Mariel had chimed in with that question before you showed that slide.
Oh, okay. So let me get to this.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So did that help answer the question? These are the companies that are doing it right. And this isn't us telling you that. That is 17,000 LGBTQ people telling you that Target is doing it right. Apple's doing it right. Subaru is doing it right. These companies not only advertise in our media, but they support our events. They wrote letters to the Supreme Court saying, come on, people, we need to have marriage equality. There's no reason not to. They're writing to Congress and they're writing letters to the Supreme Court saying, come on, equality in hiring and protection of LGBTQ employees is important to us as corporations. Get with the program. So companies that are effective, using their weight, using their size and power to move the society along, I think they're the ones who are doing it right. That answer it, Mario?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay,
Those
yeah.
graphs were insightful.
I was just going to say one thing that always impresses me about that list of companies that are doing it right, just from a research geek point of view, is that you don't give them a list of companies. It's open-ended. And in that kind of open-ended environment, to get 25, 30% of people just volunteering Target or Apple, I think is a really impressive number.
Yeah.
And the other thing that jumps out at me is that those companies are all really successful companies. I mean, you know, I don't see a big, you know, backlash. It's not like people are out protesting Target because of, you know, a friendly LGBTQ stance.
Well, they did for a little while, and then they went shopping. So, you know, the boycotts really disappear. You know, there are factions out there who are trying to make life miserable for us for God knows what reason. It's basically mind your own business, people. You can do what you want, let us do what we want. But the main thing, you're right, is that they're large companies. Apple's probably the largest company in the world, and Google is up there, and they're all really strong in the LGBTQ community, and they're all really obviously strong companies. So yeah, I agree with you. To have that many people type in the word Target means Target is front of mind, right? I mean, it's like, okay, these companies are doing a great job. I saw their ad. I saw them sponsor the Human Rights Campaign. I saw their name on a letter to the Supreme Court. That company is doing it right. So they're typing it in. I love that question. It's like my favorite question every year because it tells a real story of how corporate America is affecting change. So we got to love them for that.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a message that we don't hear very often. Like the great things that corporate America is doing, especially through marketing. And that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think so too. So we have to keep that in mind as we're balancing the pros and cons of what corporate America is doing to and for our communities. So finances, I'm just going to touch on this for a second or two. I think it's really interesting to see that our financial confidence is eroding. That's maybe no surprise. It's eroding for everyone, but it's also eroding across all LGBTQ in this political environment and this disease, the health environment, and now, of course, the fires and smoke aren't helping anything. But you'll see that there are differences within LGBTQ as well. And that's why we always, always break it out. We never just publish all LGBTQ anything. It's so misleading because you'll see that millennials and Generation X having a harder time and need attention more than baby boomers. You'll see that Black and African American and Latinx LGBTQs are also struggling more than their Pacific Islander, Asian, and their white non-Hispanic communities. And so organizations need to know this information and be able to address those issues and concerns. I'm going to talk a little bit about the election and politics, and then we'll take another question break. So political views, you probably assume that we're all bleeding heart liberals, and we are mostly, but not all. And this kind of surprised us too, that 29% said we're moderate to liberal, not necessarily entirely liberal. And they might feel more moderate because of fiscal, being a little bit more fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. And moderate 8%, moderate to conservative 4%. Only 2% said that they're fully conservative people. I don't know who they're going to vote for. I hope they don't vote against our community, but you never know. We're also feeling significant anxiety and tension about this election because, as I mentioned before, we're very concerned. We made a lot of progress during the Obama years. We're losing a lot of the progress that was made in this past 3.75 years. We just cannot bear another 4 years of it. So we're very anxious about this coming election. And hopefully that means we're all going to get out to vote. And hopefully all of you on this Zoom call who can vote will vote. So what motivates us? Obviously, probably to everyone here, LGBTQ equality is a major concern, but it's not our only concern. And I think that's also really important to understand is we are multifaceted, just like the general population. So we're very concerned about healthcare equality and cost. We're concerned about fair elections and the protection of democracy. Racial discrimination comes up very strong across LGBTQ. The ability to respond to the pandemic. So it's interesting, we wrote this survey in January and February, and there was this like rumor of COVID, right? It was called coronavirus, and we didn't know where it was going. Maybe it was just going to disappear. We didn't know, nobody knew, but we decided to throw it in there. And then, oh my God, it exploded, right? And it's one of our major concerns as we're deciding who to vote for. But this is all LGBTQ. What I'm going to demonstrate here is that we are not one solitary community. Supporting transgender rights is far more important to the transgender community than cisgender, lesbian and bi women, and cisgender gay and bi men. So if you're not familiar with the term cisgender, it basically means you identify as the person's gender that's on your birth certificate. And that may not be necessarily who you identify as now. So cisgender means I'm Tom, I'm a gay man, I'm male. I was designated male on my birth certificate, and I'm male now. Transgender and gender expansive is a whole spectrum of other identities not identified as cisgender. So hopefully that is a 1 minute science lesson for you. Supporting HIV prevention and care is much more important to cisgender, bi, and gay and bi men and transgender, and supporting women's causes within LGBTQ community, much stronger for the lesbian community. What I think is a little sad here, and we present this research everywhere we can, is why don't gay men feel as strongly about supporting women's causes within our community as cisgender, lesbian, and bi women? It kind of upsets us. And you'll see this across the board. You'll see in terms of supporting ethnic and racial equality, it's much stronger among the millennial community. And senior care is much stronger among the baby boomers, as maybe expected, but we would hope that millennials and Generation X, knowing that sooner or later they're going to be old people too, would care. And then when we're looking at by ethnicity, supporting ethnic and racial equality within the LGBTQ community is much stronger among LGBTQ people of color than among white non-Hispanic. And supporting protections for LGBTQ immigrants and LGBTQ international rights also stronger among LGBTQ people of color. So it's our purpose to disseminate this research, get this out to the organizations that serve our communities, and really get the ball rolling to equalize these numbers. We'd like to see that happen, and research helps. Couple more sections here. Any questions as I take a little breather?
A quick question. What, in terms of using the right terminology in marketing, what about microaggressions, such as referring to everyone as guys, you know, or kind of like that casual speech? How much is that effective, or how, you know, in the percentage, how deteriorating could that be for a brand?
I love that question. And I'm going to, after this is over, I'm going to make a note of it, because I think we should be asking that, because just like saying the gay market, a lot of lesbians, a lot of non-binary gender orientation people will feel, or gender identity people will feel, okay, you know, that's an inclusive term. I'll buy into it and I won't get mad. But there are segments, an increasing number of the lesbian community who do not identify as gay, because that's really become a term for male identified people. So similarly, I think if a corporation refers to you guys and there are female identified people in that audience, they have a right to feel omitted and a right to be upset about that. So it's a great question. I think we should be asking that. Thank you.
Yeah, I've caught myself using guys in that way, and then I was, oh, that isn't right. And then my first instinct is to say guys and gals, and I know that definitely isn't right.
No,
So,
people.
yeah, people works. People works
Yeah.
on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Folks, maybe that one I see.
Yeah. Instead of saying welcome, ladies and gentlemen, just say welcome, everyone. I mean, it takes a little training, maybe, because ladies and gentlemen is sort of the polite term from days of yore. But really, especially as younger generations are less likely to be identifying as cisgender male or cisgender female, we have to really adapt our terminology. And that's also, again, a little bit of a history lesson. It used to be the Latino community, right? But now there's a term Latinx with an X at the end instead of Latina or Latino. The X indicates of Latin descent and without any gender attached to it. So let's talk a little bit about demographics and maybe dispel some rumors or assumptions. LGBTQ people do not all live in big cities. And if you live in San Francisco, you might assume that we all live in San Francisco or even in the Castro, but we don't. And this is something that's been changing over the years. And I think it's fascinating. Back in the 90s, we tracked a migration from, you could say, just looking at zip codes and people's moves. They were born and raised in Wichita. As soon as they came out as gay, they got the hell out of Wichita and they moved to Kansas City. And then as soon as they could, they got out of Kansas City and moved to Chicago. There's this migration away from the sort of small-minded towns to the bigger cities where there are more educated people and more acceptance. But now we see that we really live in all communities. And I think that's a fascinating new finding. We did a study for Freddie Mac, which is the mortgage company. And that was all about LGBTQ and housing. And this was a big finding from that. LGBTQ friendliness is different among community types. And you may feel that way yourselves as you travel from big cities to smaller towns, no matter how you identify. If you're something different than what is considered a straight white man, you may not feel that comfortable in a small rural area. And we definitely feel that way as well. So we feel that living in a big urban city, at least very friendly, maybe somewhat friendly, very few feel that it's unfriendly. And then the smaller the town, the numbers on the bar charts change and shift to the left. But I love this. Our country right now is kind of under a siege of antiquated opinions about the LGBTQ community. And so we did a comparison when we did a study in Canada. There were 2,000 Canadians who took the survey. What we found was Canadians feel like they live in a very LGBTQ friendly country, and LGBTQ Americans do not feel like they live in a very LGBT friendly country. Then you look at us at the provincial level or the state level, where we have more choice, and you'll see that it's a little bit more even. And then when you get to our communities, we pretty much strongly agree. So why that's important is we can choose where we live. Most of us who are Americans are probably going to live in America. We can move to a different state. We can certainly move to a more gay-friendly or LGBTQ-friendly community. And so I thought it was really interesting to show these differences based on the government and the government policies of these two countries, how welcome we feel living in our own places. So we're a dynamic community. We're less likely to live where we grew up than the general market. I forget the number, but I think it's something like over 50% of the general population lives within 40 miles of where they were born. This is not the case with the LGBTQ community. We have picked up and moved to someplace more friendly. Men are more likely to be single. Women are more likely to be in a relationship. Why that's important is because as a consumer, being single means you can be more impulsive. If I'm single and I want to buy the newest iPad Pro that just came out today, I'm probably just going to go down and buy it, right? But if I'm in a relationship or have family and kids, there are much bigger considerations to that purchasing decision. So different products and services might approach the lesbian community versus the gay male community differently based on that product or service. Lesbians and bisexual women are far more likely to be parents. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Discrimination, especially among the transgender community, affects purchases. We feel included or we feel excluded. And that comes down to every single product or service that we touch. And we're a culture. As I sort of started off saying, our approach to the LGBTQ market is that we're a cultural community. Doesn't matter which letter you identify with, LGBT or Q, we're really a culture and we identify as that culture. Employment is important, right? Where we go and get a job. I thought it was gratifying to see that 59% of baby boomers feel like they work for a very LGBTQ friendly company. But that number decreases over the generations. And it's probably because baby boomers have traded jobs a few times until they found a genuinely welcoming place and stayed there. And in terms of relationship status, as I just mentioned, gay men are more likely to be single, lesbians are more likely to be in a relationship. We like to break this out again because there are differences across the community, and these differences will translate into communications. And in terms of parents, cisgender, lesbian and bi women and transgender people are far more likely to have kids. Now, if you look at all LGBT number and we only publish that, you'd think, okay, 22% of all LGBTQs have kids. You'd assume that that meant men and women, right? And transgender, but it's not. You have to break it out and see the differences there. And additionally, 19% of baby boomers have grandkids. We did a study for the Walt Disney Company, and they were very interested in the grandchildren market because as these boomers come out and they get in a relationship with a person of the same gender, they may have been in a different gender relationship before and had kids, and those kids are having kids. And so there's this whole emerging market that I think is really interesting of baby boomers who have grandkids. And of course, they love to spoil their grandkids like all grandparents do. We're a community that has pets. We pretty much match overall, the general population in terms of pet ownership. The big difference is you saw that photo when I started this conversation of me and my husband, Scott, and our dog, Leela. Leela is our child. Okay, so pets are our children, and pets play even though I think lots of families maybe they have a dog, it's just not the same. And a lot of advertisers will include a photo of a same-sex couple and their dog. And I think that's a really good way to connect with us. So I'm going to finish off this section, media and events, just to sort of touch on it. Again, back to communications. Wherever you go to work, you're probably going to be involved in how to communicate to your markets, and LGBTQ will be one of those markets, if not a very important market for your company. And what we're finding is that the gay media is not dead. The gay media is not dying. A lot of people will say, well, print is dying. And yes, print is challenged, I would say, in every market, including LGBTQ. But we are as engaged, if not more engaged, with our media as ever. And that's a really great way for companies to connect with us, is to advertise in our media. We asked that question, how influenced are you when companies advertise in the LGBTQ media, digital or print? And the vast majority are influenced by those ads. So when we go and meet with a new client, they'll say, we're advertising in the New York Times. We're advertising, if they're a travel company, we're advertising in Travel and Leisure. Aren't we reaching the gays? And the answer is, yeah, you're reaching the gays. But if you place a dedicated creative in a dedicated media, that resonates with us so much more than just seeing that ad in the Chronicle or somewhere else. So that's, I think, an important sociological slice here that all of you can use, no matter what market segments you're looking for. You have to demonstrate that the company that wants to do the outreach is genuinely engaged in our media. It also has a much greater impact on us than the general media. So this is a slide that our media partners use, like the BAR in San Francisco is a LGBTQ newspaper. They use this data because they can demonstrate to Subaru or American Airlines or Wells Fargo, if you advertise in our media, you're going to have far more impact on us than your ads in the general market. And we also trust our media far more. If a company places an ad in the BAR, we don't only see that ad for Wells Fargo, we see Wells Fargo is supporting our community's media. How important is that with all this crap out there on social media and in the culture wars, to have a resource that we can trust, that we can get our data from, that we can learn from about what's going on in our community. And so we trust the LGBTQ media far more than the general market media. And that's, again, why ads in those media are so important. So I'm going to take questions in a second, but I want to introduce you to our website. It's cmi.info. Don't type in cmi.com. We didn't buy it as $10,000 for that URL. So we went with info. That's $12. And so cmi.info will bring you to our website, and we have a ton of research that you can download. So if your focus is on tourism and hospitality, I really encourage you to download our tourism survey and the more recent COVID-19 travel survey. If you're studying an automotive company, then download the LGBTQ automotive, etc. The community survey that I just covered, we only had an hour. I didn't have enough time to cover everything. There's a lot more to it. So go to the website. All these reports are completely free. You just click and you get and you start downloading it. So no conditions to it. Really encourage you to dive into it. And again, if your focus isn't LGBTQ, if it's the Latinx market, if it's the African-American market, if it's the youth market, still download these reports, because you'll learn a lot about differentiation and how you can take a look at your own market segments. So now, Stephen, any last questions for me?
Yeah, well, first I would say there's a lot of great information in those reports, and I do encourage people to dig into that. We've got our class divided up into 6 teams, and each one has a brand that they're going to be doing a presentation for. So there are a couple in travel. There's Airbnb and Expedia.
Excellent.
And then I don't know if you have any quick insights on this very diverse group of 4 brands: Corona Beer, Fenty, Rihanna's luxury brand, Netflix, and Tatcha skincare brand?
All of the above. I mean, especially tourism. Take a look at the tourism studies. Those will give you, for Airbnb, you'll actually see a chart that talks about, millennial, Gen X, and baby boomers, and gender and generation and ethnicity, how many are using Airbnb. So I think go there to that page and you'll learn a lot, and it's something that you can incorporate because Airbnb is really making inroads into our community. And Expedia, same thing. Travel is the big segment in the LGBTQ market. It was among the first. They were our clients for 10 years, and we've worked with most of them. We've done studies for San Francisco Travel, for example, but all the major CVBs, convention visitors bureaus across the country. Then we've worked with Visit Britain, Argentina. We've worked with France and Sweden and Japan, Argentina, I mentioned. So these different countries are also studying the LGBTQ community. Canada and various cities within Canada. Travel's big. So I'll just leave it at that. I could talk for an hour about just travel and LGBTQ. Alcohol consumption, the very first advertiser in the LGBTQ media was Absolute Vodka. Back in, they're not sure if it was 1979 or 1982. They took the back cover of the Advocate magazine, and they were literally the first. So alcohol is a big leader in the community. If you download the consumer survey that I mentioned on the last page, the lower left consumer product survey report, there's discussion there about fashion, there's discussion there about alcohol consumption. Pretty much everything else aside from travel is contained in that consumer product survey report. And if you have any other follow-up questions, by all means, let me know, because I would love to continue this conversation.
Excellent. Well, we had a couple of questions come in on the chat. Jessica, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just wanted to know if there was a preference for couples in the LGBTQ community for when they refer to each other, like partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so for years and years, so I'm married. We've been together for 22 years. For 20 of those years, he was my partner. And now he's my husband. So it takes a while to sort of convert to the proper, I would say proper terminology and refer to him as my husband, but I am, and more of us are. A lot of people are more comfortable with the term partner. And there are a lot of derogatory terms that we probably don't use in this conversation here that we call each other too. But most of the time when I refer him to other people, I say my husband. And it's also kind of advocacy. If I'm sitting on an airplane and I say my name's Tom, I'll turn to Scott and I'll say, this is my husband, Scott, because people need to get sensitized to that and start to feel comfortable with the concept.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And Nikita has a very interesting question as well.
So yesterday during our consumer behavior class, we actually discussed the reducing influence of celebrities as influencers. So my question is that in the case of the LGBTQ community, if brands associate with celebrities like Megan Rapinoe, who are from the community, is that looked at as authentic and purposeful, or is it also looked at skeptically?
As many people as identify as LGBTQ, there will be that many opinions on that answer. Some people are really offended by the celebrity world and leveraging their celebrity in the marketplace, and others are really behind it and follow everything in Instagram, and they're all over the place. We're actually doing right now an LGBTQ Black community survey. This will be our second time doing it because it's so important right now to hear the voices of the Black LGBTQ community. And one of the questions in there literally is, who are your heroes? And that can be the options we give them. It can be something general like a teacher or a parent, or it can be the name of a celebrity or a sports figure or anybody like that, politician. So yeah, there's no one answer to that. As many of us as there are, there's that many answers. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
Well, I've got one final question for you. I mean, just one of the things that strikes me, you know, I've studied attitudes and attitude change for a long time, and there have been two areas where attitudes have changed just so rapidly. It's just really shocking to me and a lot of pollsters and people who followed this. And one has been the legalization of marijuana, and the other has been the legalization of gay marriage. And it just, it seems like it's happened so quickly. I'm sure it was a longer, harder struggle than it might seem to an outsider like me. But can you just talk about how rapidly that's changed? Or maybe, you know, was it, you know, the role of millennials, who I think kind of got a more tolerant kind of attitude being more pervasive in society? How did it change seemingly so fast?
It wasn't that fast, but honestly, it was. In the bigger picture of history, it was a flash. I mean, compared to the struggles of the Black American community, which is still brutally differentiated, marriage equality came along very quickly, and our human rights have been respected very quickly in the bigger picture. It's been, if you were in it, it's been a long haul, and it's still not over by any means. So yes, I think the older, more conservative people are dying off, and younger, more open and more diverse people. Younger people, honestly, in my observation, and probably many of those of us on the call today would agree, you don't care, right? It's like you go to a gay bar with your gay friend and he'll come with you to your straight bar. It's like, no big deal, it doesn't matter. It's not even really an issue. Whereas when I grew up, it wasn't only an issue, it was a terrible issue. You know, being discriminated against and shunned and being fired for being who you are. So yes, I think the diversity of the younger generations coming up and being an influencer has been huge. And I also want to turn back to corporate America. Corporate America has our back. And I think it's been remarkable what they have done, how they've risked their, you know, their shareholders and their stock value and their bottom line to stand up for equality has been just, you can't see it, but I have goosebumps just telling you this. It's been a phenomenal observation to see what they've done. And to take a little bit of credit for that, I think research has helped corporations open their doors, because they, you know, back in the early 90s, they were doing everything they could to not say gay, not say LGBTQ. If they found out that an employee was LGBTQ, they probably would be dismissed. To today, where there are whole ballrooms in pre-COVID and post-COVID, ballrooms of corporations recruiting LGBTQ employees. So it's in 2 decades for that transformation to take place. I have to give credit to corporate America. They've done so much for us, and we just have to show our appreciation, at least for that.
Yeah, and like I said, that's not something that you hear a lot. So,
yeah, I know.
So I know we're about up on time. Super last question for you.
Sure.
What advice would you have for people who want to be a better ally to the community?
Terminology is important. Getting involved with our community, one way or the other, whatever makes you feel comfortable. If you're joining the business world, join our LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. It's not just for the gays, it's for everybody. And it's a great way to network and to learn and to interact, to show that you care. And just in every communication, vote, I would say, is a great way to show that you're an ally of our community and get these people out and get more progressive people in. It's as multifaceted as the individuals listening to that question and my answer. Different people will resonate with different things. There are lots of social clubs that are a great way to connect. But being an ally means just about everything. Just like, you know, we're supporting Black-owned businesses right now. If there's an LGBTQ-owned business that you can buy something from, that, you know, that really helps a lot too. Lots of different ways. And I appreciate the question.
Yeah, super interesting. Everybody, if we can give a clap for our guest speaker. And Tom, always super interesting and informative. And like I said, inspirational. I really appreciate your time. And thanks so much. Everybody, let's take a 5-minute bio break and we'll come back for some more resource presentations.
Please, and feel free to send me an email. Happy to follow up. Take
Okay,
care, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, folks, 5 minutes. righty, we'll give folks another minute here. All right, so let's start powering through some resource presentations. Woohoo! So I've changed up the order just a little bit from what I had on the deck. I wanted to make sure that we were able to get Srinidhi in tonight because she might have a conflict for the next class. Oh, and let me just show you real super quick. I'm just going to share. So this is a PDF I mentioned that I downloaded from the resource we were talking about earlier today. So here's an example of what one of these reports would look like. So it's, it's 4 or 5 pages. It is prose, but it's got a lot of good stuff. I mean, you can see as they go into the history here that, starting in December 2018, they started bringing in a whole bunch of new people and in these kinds of offices, and they brought in people to kind of beef up this, that, and the other thing. So it is, like we said, it's not the most data driven of resources, but it's a really good place to start your resource presentation or your brand presentation, because you are going to want to, try to speak to that CEO. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so let's go. Let's start powering through. Sabrina, you are up first.
Okay, I actually made a small presentation. If I could share my screen.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna put this into present mode.
Wow,
okay.
That's jazzy. All right, go ahead.
Great. So for my database, I have Ipsos Global Market Research. And just to briefly go over what it is, Ipsos is a data supplier and a public opinion polling service that prides itself on acquiring and distributing accurate and relevant information, which leads to helping clients better understand the public, the general's opinion, and their target segment. They offer both paid services and unpaid services, but for the focus of the class, I'll just highlight the free services. So the main things that they offer concerning insights and polls are media and brand communication, consumer and shopper reports, customer experience insights, and societal insights based on kind of what's going on in like the current news and trends that are happening, and anything else that they can kind of see that's going to be in the nearby foreseeable future is what they kind of do for their insights and polls. And so to briefly go over some key figures and company history, they were founded in 1975 in Paris, and they quickly expanded in 1990 into Europe, North America, and Latin America. And then in 2011, they became one of the biggest companies after a acquisition that they had. And then they created their New Way Foundation, which was kind of a way to introduce societal marketing and kind of giving back. And they incorporated a lot of their clients within that foundation. And now currently they've developed what's called the True Understanding, which kind of is their new marketing position, which is where they're really trying to grow faster and really understand where the public is now and how they are doing, especially in light of the pandemic, and to basically put their customer and client first. And they have also become the 3rd largest global market research company. So they have over 18,000 employees, 5,000 clients, and 47 million interviews. And 23 million of those interviews are actually online, and they are also in 90 markets. So as you can see, they're a huge company. So some other key strengths is their privacy. They really value privacy, which we kind of know right now, especially for marketers, is very big in the news. Compliance and security is something that clients are becoming more fascinated about, and they want to make sure that their data is being protected. So Ipsos goes above and beyond when protecting their clients. They have what's called Green Book, and that is a code of their own privacy that they've tried to incorporate into all of their interviews and research and anything that they use that concerns client or privacy, they kind of ensure to their consumers and participants that they their information is going to be safe with them. And that's even going beyond the SMART code, which is what a lot of data companies have to abide by in general. So it's, it's great that they are able to be so compliant. Another one of their key strengths, which I think is also their main strength, is their studies and insights that they provide. They regularly conduct studies and insights on current news and all trends, allowing the site to have always like current information about the general public. And then their UI is super easy to use and has lots of qualitative and quantitative data that you can download in reports. And it's really great for secondary research. Some of their weaknesses is, unfortunately, again, like I said, I guess this wouldn't necessarily be a weakness, but it is a paid service, which makes it kind of difficult for students like us to use during class. But for marketers, again, their services are great. You can make your own polls and do that. And again, like I said, they're in over 90 markets. So it's great to get unbiased results from them using their markets, but it is a paid service. And then they did get some weak ratings on their polling methodologies sometimes because they pay some respondents. Not all of the participants may be qualified. But again, that's only for a small section of their polls. So overall, they're a really strong company. Again, you can't be the third largest data supplier and not be a great company. So I would say their optimal applications is definitely in polling, consumer insights, and consumer opinion reports. And again, just kind of going off of what I said earlier, it is fantastic for secondary research. I mean, if you're ever curious about what the public really feels about a certain trend, topic, company, I would highly recommend visiting this website. It's so helpful. It's the way I could describe it is basically if you're picturing a Statista infographic, and I say that because I think we've all been on Statista, you can get that same similar infographic, but they've gone out, they've conducted this research on their own, and then they've added their own insights to this. So instead of just giving you numbers, instead of just giving you quantitative data, they go an extra step and they go, well, why do you guys feel this way? And you get this qualitative data and you get these insights that are so rich in consumer information, and that can just really open up a whole new funnel of other research topics that you can kind of figure out, well, great, what direction should I go into now? So I absolutely love it. I had never heard of it prior to this research paper, but I fell in love with the site. So I did, for my examples, 2 examples. I did one on the corona vaccine and how different countries felt on that, which was super interesting. And I highly recommend people check that out. But because of our projects, I went ahead and found a couple of links that maybe Dr. K could send out that I think would be really helpful for everybody's project. But it basically talks about, these are like the top 4 that I thought were really interesting. But it basically talks about like the evolution of shopping behavior in 2020, beyond price promotions, because a lot of companies are using price promotions as their way of kind of coping with the pandemic, but there's so much more you can do. And Ipsos has really done research to show what marketers can do and how they can make that shift. What brand rituals are going to look like in a low touch world because things are not necessarily open. And I know a lot of brands are facing, like for the cosmetic industries, you can no longer try on makeup. And that's going to be a big thing in that whole industry. So this is kind of an article that kind of shows how you're going to have to make a shift. And one of the main key points in this was, now that the pandemic has happened and it's still currently happening, a lot of new rituals are being adopted by consumers. I mean, a lot of people did not have Purell in their cars prior to the pandemic, but now you get in your car and you